Hello Internet. Welcome again to Sunday Sit Down with Alan Jones. Today is December 20th and I'd like to welcome you all to the show. I hope you enjoy it. Last week I mentioned that I wanted to speak about the economics of relationships, and it's really about the supply and demand and how those principles can be applied to this very same topic. The topic's been on my heart for a while because living in Atlanta, Georgia, and having traveled the last 14 years as a consultant, I've seen a lot of things. And one thing I've found persistent is that a lot of the women that I know tend to complain about the lack of availability of good men, and I understand that there are some inequities, some disparity between the numbers between men and women in some urban areas, Atlanta, DC, LA, and I've seen that as well. But I think that even though the numbers aren't as bad as some of the claims that I've heard, I know that I've seen some of those numbers. They aren't that far off, but excuse me, it's a perception of a shortage, which is the issue, which is the same thing in the marketplace when you talk about supply and demand. It's a perception of a shortage. The gas shortage we had here a few years ago when the hurricanes rolled through the Gulf. Atlanta gets most of their gas through Savannah. However, people believe that there was a shortage and they behaved in that same manner. The same is true in the dating circle. The women of Atlanta and DC and LA perceive a shortage, and there is a shortage, but they perceive a shortage that is way beyond what the numbers actually justify. But that's irrelevant what the real numbers are. If people behave in such a way that they believe that there's a shortage in a commodity, being men in this case, then they're going to have that same effect. They're going to overpay. Same, conversely, is true for men who believe that there is a shortage of men or overabundance of women, that the supply of women is great, then they're going to underpay, essentially. And when I say payment, I'm talking about behavior and how you treat each other and willingness to commit and things of that nature. So it's a whole bundle of things there. And I guess you might say, how did we get here? And I think that's an interesting question. And before I would even mention that, I would say that there are two parts of how did we get here. The first one deals with the reality of a mobile society. In my travels, I've worked in New York, LA, and Chicago, but I've worked in Gainesville, Florida, Huntsville, Alabama, and Greenville, South Carolina. And I've worked in Greenville, South Carolina, which I really enjoy, that town. I've worked there 3 or 4 contracts. And the point being is that during all that time, which spanned multiple years, I only met, I think, one African-American woman with a college degree who wasn't looking to leave. Every other, quote, sister that I met there was waiting for the next opportunity. They just thought Greenville was too small, and that's consistent with other women across racial lines, that women in general want to go where there are amenities and whatnot. So you have this migration going on, and I think the 2010 census may reflect it if they get down into the granular socioeconomic divide and the strata where I see this occurring, that so many educated women are flocking to the urban areas, and it's causing an arbitrage, if you will, in the marketplace. So the upshoot of that is that you have more women in urban areas and fewer in rural areas. And we all know the situation in urban areas, but on the flip side of that, in the rural areas, and there's an article in msnbc.com, which I'll post in the sidebar either on this side, or somewhere down here, but it talks about how women in urban areas do better if they have good looks. That looks is the commodity in urban areas, but looks in rural areas don't seem to matter as much. And I would say that is true. In the smaller markets, men, like women, adjust to what's around them. Okay, so if a lot of the women are relocating and whatnot, that the men adjust, even though there may be more men, and you think about it, that has to be true. If there are more women in the urban areas than in the rural areas, there are more men, that the men adjust. So then their, quote, standards, and I don't really want to use that word either, but their standards of what they consider to be, or their expand to encompass more women, okay, or more types of women. And these women are happier in these areas, I think, in large part because they have more choices when it comes to men, and they're pursued and they're treated better, okay, and they're happier. And that's the whole mobile society is a part of that. But the other contributor to the situation we now find ourselves in is has a lot to do with the sexual revolution. And I know that may not be politically correct to say, but I think that the sexual revolution and the social revolution, which were joined together, rightly or wrongly to some degree, have brought some of this about. Now, having said that, we can't go back. I think the economic progress of women in the workplace is, and I have daughters, so I'm totally down with that. So I think that's a good thing, a very good thing. But that and the sexual revolution have set up a scenario where it's changed the balance of power between men and women, which was established, tens of hundreds of thousands in the last 50 years. We've changed the rules of the game. The game has changed, and I think that has caused some uncomfortableness. That it's interesting to me that it seems as though the baby boomers who were part of both sides of both of those revolutions basically wrote a check, sold us a dream, which America is so good. That's what America does, sell dreams, and we're good at it. But it seems as though Generation X and Generation Y are having to cash the check. Many of the baby boomers had lofty goals and ideas between equality between the races and the sexes, and the birthing of that dream is what we're all going through now. I think, and we'll get there from a socioeconomic and racial and sexual point. But I think that you have to go through this middle passage, and that those of us in Generation X and Y who came into this this new paradigm where things are shifting and the topography is still changing, are experiencing that pain. And that, for instance, a friend of mine who was a consultant long before I was told me that she could never date a man that made less money than her. Okay, and she's a little bit older than I am, and she was raised with expectation that men provide, and that's historically the perception that women have. So if she's making X amount of dollars, he needs to make Y. Okay, but she was already, in the late 80s, early 90s, making a six-figure income. So, less than 1% of the U.S. population makes over six figures, even today. Or it might be right at 1% today, but definitely back then it wasn't. So she precluded herself from many potentially positive relationships and long-term relationships because she had this preconceived view of the world and how men and women related. So I think that is part of the problem, in that women are basically largely pricing themselves out of the market because of the economic inequities there, where women are rising, and men, a man doesn't care largely how much a woman makes. That's not a high criteria for him. So I think that's part of the problem. In closing, I would say that this is the cost of freedom and equal opportunity, that there are going to be some birthing pains. Which I think in the generations past, X and Y, that next generation that is totally raised in, and some of that generation Y falls in this category, but the next generation, past the echo boomers and whatnot, I think that once we have accepted these new norms, that if they're raised from conception to the dating age, that once they're comfortable with that, they'll have a different paradigm. They'll be used to it. It won't be this strain that I think I see, and the stress I think people are suffering from now because they're having to adjust what it is they want in life. And I think that, and one's happiness is based on one's expectations. So it's difficult for people to, even though they can visualize, adjusting to a new reality. I think that so many of us have been so ingrained with a certain perception of what we should expect in life from our mates and from each other, and just from such a young age. It's difficult. So I don't dismiss that at all. So what can we do about it? Okay, for the current generation, for those of you who are out there right now, Generation X and Y, what can you do? to make things better for both men and women, because men are hurting too. Men are having to adjust to this new world, particularly those that want to seek a long-term relationship. So in my next segment, I've got some thoughts on that I think might be helpful to everyone, and hopefully you'll let me know. Give me some feedback. Let me know. But do check out the MSNBC article, and I think that really lends some credence to what I'm saying here. And it's more of an observation piece. They don't really go into the whys, but that's what we're discussing here. And next week we'll discuss some specific actions that you can take to address these things in your life if you're looking to find someone and you're not finding that where you're at now. Okay? Thank you so much, everyone, and you guys just have a great day and a blessed week. Bye-bye.